It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I remember standing there, heart pounding beneath layers of lace and silk, trying to hold on to the moment. The music had started, low and graceful, just like I imagined it would be. Guests filled every seat, faces I loved, and some I tolerated, all turned toward me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Just anticipation. He was waiting at the end of the aisle, the man who saw all my cracks and chose me anyway. And then, it happened. The sound of a chair screeching across stone snapped me out of that dreamlike calm. I turned instinctively, and there she was. My mother. On her feet, walking down the center aisle with a rage that felt rehearsed. The guests shifted in their seats, unsure if this was real. I knew it was. "You're making a mistake!" she shouted, loud enough to bounce off the walls. "He's not good enough for you!" The air thickened, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd pass out, or wake up. But no, this was real, and it was happening. "You're throwing your life away!" She kept going, voice trembling with that familiar venom I knew too well. I felt every pair of eyes burning into me, waiting to see what I'd do. He, my almost husband, started to step forward, but I lifted my hand to stop him. This wasn't his battle. This was mine. I turned to face her, the woman who taught me to smile through clenched teeth. "Mom," I said, steady as I could, "don't do this." But she wasn't listening, not to me, not to reason, not to anything but her own unraveling. And then came the dagger. "You'll end up just like me, miserable." It landed hard in front of everyone I loved, but something in me shifted. It was like the child in me, the one who used to hide from her storms, finally stood up. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I looked her dead in the eye and saw it all so clearly. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I stopped being her daughter and became her mirror. I could hear people shifting in their seats, whispering behind their hands, pretending to look away while hanging on to every word. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was watching her, watching how her rage didn't come from love. It came from fear. Not fear of me getting hurt, no. Fear of losing her grip, of me stepping into something she never had the courage to build for herself. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for someone to validate her. No one moved. No one stood by her side. She was alone in her fury, and I think she knew it. Still, she didn't stop. "He'll leave you," she yelled. "He'll cheat on you like your father did to me." I felt that sting, not because I believed her, but because she wanted it to hurt. That's what she did. She dressed her bitterness in warnings and called it love, and for years I swallowed it. Bit down on my own voice so she could scream hers, but not today. I looked around at the flowers I chose, the dress I paid for, the people I invited, all of it mine. And I thought, why am I still trying to protect her from herself? I stepped forward, heels echoing against the tile, and gently reached for the mic from the officiant's hand. My fingers didn't shake. My voice didn't break. I turned to the guests and said, "I want to say something." The room went still. My mother froze, like she didn't expect me to fight back. At least not like this. I looked straight at her. "You're not trying to protect me," I said. "You're trying to stop me from doing what you never could." Her face tightened, her fists clenched, and I didn't flinch. And then, something inside me, something small but fierce, whispered, "Don't hold back anymore." I let my truth rise to the surface, the truth I'd buried for years under loyalty and guilt. "You're scared," I said, "not for me, but of me. You're scared I'll build a life better than yours, and you should be." That was it, the line that cracked her. Her mouth dropped, and her eyes, once blazing, now looked almost lost. But she wasn't done. Oh no. She took one step closer, and I knew something worse was coming. She stormed up to me, eyes wild, lips trembling with rage she couldn't contain anymore. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the birds outside seemed to pause, like the universe itself was holding its breath. And then it happened. Sharp, fast, humiliating. Her hand connected with my face. The sound of the slap echoed louder than any vow I could have spoken. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, cheeks stinging, staring back at her. Not in shock, but in clarity. Because in that instant, she did what words never could. She made my freedom undeniable. I didn't cry. I didn't step back. I turned my head slowly, met her gaze, and smiled. Not with joy, but with a strange kind of peace. The kind that only comes when the last thread snaps and you realize you're finally free. "Thank you," I said quietly, just loud enough for the first few rows to hear. Now I have no guilt for what comes next. And I meant it, every word, because that slap, it wasn't punishment, it was permission. It was the last brick in a wall I no longer had to climb. People were still frozen, some with hands over their mouths, others staring at their shoes like they were embarrassed for even being there. My fiancé was motionless at the end of the aisle, his face torn between horror and awe. But I wasn't looking at him. I wasn't looking at anyone. I was inside myself now. The version of me I had spent years suffocating. The version she tried to shame out of existence. But she was here now. Alive. Awake. Ready. And in that moment, something shifted in the room. The story had changed. I wasn't the bride anymore. I was something else. Something sharper. Stronger. I took a step down from the altar, lifted my train, and walked, not away from a wedding, but toward something I should have chosen long ago. Myself. The whispers followed me, and so did the silence. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of anything. This was the beginning. She crashed my wedding thinking she'd humiliate me. But what she really did was set the stage for everything I was about to become. I should have felt broken after that slap. Should have curled into myself, let the shame swallow me whole like she expected it to. But I didn't. I stood there for a breath longer, and something inside me, something tired of pretending, snapped into focus. I walked back to the altar. The microphone was still there, like it had been waiting for me. My fingers wrapped around it, calm and sure. My voice, when it came, didn't shake. "Since we're sharing," I said, "let me tell you all a story." And just like that, the ceremony became a reckoning. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. There's something far more powerful about truth when it's spoken plainly, without apology. I looked straight at her, my mother, the woman who lit fires just to watch me run barefoot through them, and I said, "You want to talk about mistakes?" My voice softened, but my words sharpened. How about the nights I hid in closets while you screamed at Dad? Or the mornings I found your perfume on someone else's shirt, and you told me I was imagining it? The gasps in the crowd weren't just shock. They were recognition. "You didn't raise me to be careful," I continued. "You raised me to be silent." My breath caught a little there, not from nerves but from memory. "You taught me how to hide bruises under sleeves and feelings behind smiles. But guess what? I'm not hiding anymore." I looked around at the faces watching, some wide-eyed, some tearing up. I wasn't alone. Not this time. And she knew it. I could see the panic rising in her, the way her arms crossed defensively, the way she blinked too fast. For once, I wasn't the one unraveling. Then I said it. The line I'd been afraid to even think out loud until that day. "You're not scared I'll ruin my life. You're scared I'll build one better than yours." And there it was. The room tilted on those words. She didn't scream this time. She didn't speak. She just stared at me, mouth opening slightly, like she was trying to find a version of herself that could still control this moment. But it was gone. The curtain was down. And what came next wasn't rage from me. It was something colder, something far more dangerous. She started walking toward me, stiff and slow like a bomb about to go off. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step louder than the last. But I didn't back away. I stood my ground. The little girl in me, the one who used to shrink under that glare, she wasn't here anymore. My hands were steady, my spine was steel, and I looked her dead in the eye, refusing to give her what she always thrived on: fear. She reached me, chest heaving, fists clenched so tight her knuckles went white, and then she did it again. Her hand struck my face for the second time that day, harder this time, like she needed to prove she still had power. But all it did was confirm she'd lost it. The sound echoed, sharp and final, and a hush fell so deep you could have heard a pin drop. My cheek burned, but I didn't flinch. I just slowly turned my head back to face her. And I smiled. Not to provoke her, but to let her know that whatever hold she thought she had over me, it died with that slap. It was over. She just didn't know it yet. "Thank you," I whispered, and I meant it. "Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you are." Her face twisted, but she had no comeback. Not a word. Just that awful, stunned silence, the kind that falls when someone realizes the room no longer belongs to them. I glanced at the guests, the aunts and uncles who always whispered behind napkins, the cousins who watched our family drama like it was sport, and I could tell this moment would follow her, not because of me, because of her. She handed me the mic, and I handed her the truth. There's a kind of rage that screams, and then there's the kind that builds, quiet, sharp, deliberate. That second one, that's the kind I carried in my chest as I stepped back from her. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I let the silence hold her accountable. And in that space, for the first time, I felt what power really was. Not control, not manipulation, just the strength of saying exactly what needed to be said and letting it land where it may. But what I did next, that would be something she never saw coming. I handed the microphone back and stepped away, but I wasn't retreating. I was reclaiming every moment I'd swallowed words just to keep the peace. Reclaiming every memory she tried to rewrite. I walked past her slowly, close enough to smell her perfume, the same one that once clung to other people's clothes when she came home late. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her voice, that thunderous, weaponized voice, had finally met something louder. The truth spoken by someone who no longer feared her. Behind me, the guests didn't know what to do. Some avoided my eyes. Others nodded quietly, like they were trying to say, "We see you now." But it didn't matter what they thought, not really. This wasn't for them. This was for every version of me that begged for softness and got shame. For every night I cried in silence, only to wake up and pretend it was all fine. I wasn't pretending anymore. I stood taller now, straighter. Like the weight I'd carried for years had finally been set down at my feet. I found my fiancé near the altar. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something closer to awe, and something else too: pride. He didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand and I let him hold it. I didn't need saving. I never did. But in that quiet connection, I felt something I hadn't felt all day. Not relief, not celebration, but clarity. The kind that comes when the past burns away and all you see is what's next. And what was next? That wasn't going to be about white dresses or flower petals anymore. No, what came next would be mine, unfiltered, unapologetic, and entirely on my terms. I walked out of that chapel not as someone abandoned at the altar, but as someone who had chosen to walk away from the illusion. Let her have her spectacle. Let them talk. I was already thinking 3 steps ahead, because she might have torn my wedding apart, but I was just getting started. And this time, the story wouldn't be hers to narrate. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream into a pillow. I didn't fall apart like she probably expected. Instead, I went home, stepped out of the dress I had once called the one, and hung it back in the closet. Still intact, still beautiful. But something inside me had shifted. There's a silence that comes after a storm. Not peace, not yet. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I began to think. Not about what I lost, about what I wasn't willing to lose anymore. That wedding didn't fail. It was stolen. And I was ready to steal something back. A few days later, I opened my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor like it was a challenge. I started digging. Old emails, voice memos, financial statements I hadn't looked at in years. It didn't take long. My mother had never been careful, just confident that no one would ever look too closely. But I was looking now. Receipts, bank transfers, conversations she never meant for anyone else to hear. It was all there, buried in plain sight. And for the first time, I realized just how much she had built her image on other people's silence. I remembered the stories she used to tell, about how my father ruined everything, how he failed her, how he made her bitter. And for a long time, I believed it. I thought he was the absent one, the cold one. But when I called him, really called him, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity, his voice cracked, not with anger, with regret. "I knew," he said. "I just didn't have proof." That was when I knew this wasn't just my story to tell. It was his too. And maybe, just maybe, he'd been waiting for someone brave enough to say it out loud. So that became my vow. Not to ruin her, not to destroy her, but to strip away the fiction. To give the truth the space she never allowed it. I wasn't doing this out of vengeance. I was doing it for the little girl who learned to survive on silence. For the father who never got to speak. For the family who deserved to know what hid beneath the polished surface of her lies. She tore my wedding apart. Fine. But now I was going to tear her mask off, piece by piece. I started keeping a folder on my desktop, password protected, named something dull like tax receipts, just in case. But inside, it was a timeline of her unraveling, screenshots of text messages she forgot I could access, audio files from voicemails left in the heat of her tantrums, a scanned check she once wrote to a cousin, hush money disguised as a gift. Each file wasn't just evidence, it was a thread from the web she had spun so carefully, and the more I pulled, the more I saw how tangled it all really was. It was strange, really, how easy it was to become the version of me she always feared, the version that didn't flinch, that didn't apologize for looking too closely, for asking questions, for remembering things she prayed I'd forget. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear, like everything I was doing was long overdue. This wasn't revenge in the way people imagine it, dramatic, fiery, loud. No, it was surgical, quiet, almost graceful. The kind of revenge that's soaked in truth, not rage. The kind that doesn't just burn, it exposes. I met with my father in a quiet cafe across town. He looked older than I remembered, like time had finally caught up with all the things he never said. When I slid the folder across the table to him, he didn't ask what was inside. He just stared at it, hands still, then nodded. "She always knew how to keep people in check," he said. "But you, she never knew how to contain you." I didn't respond right away. I just sipped my coffee and felt, for the first time in years, like he saw me. Not as a daughter caught in the crossfire, but as someone holding the match. There was no going back now, but I didn't want to. I wasn't haunted by guilt. I was fueled by clarity. I knew what I was building wasn't destruction, it was liberation, not just for me, but for everyone she'd ever manipulated into silence. This wasn't about taking her down in one dramatic blow. It was about unraveling the story she forced us to live in, and telling a new one. One that didn't start with shame, one that didn't end with her. I started to notice the small cracks in her world before anyone else did, the way certain relatives stopped returning her calls. The tension in her voice when she asked me, too sweetly, how I'd been spending my time. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know from where, and that was the power of it. For once, I was ahead of her. For once, I was the one holding the truth and choosing when, where, and how to let it slip into the light. It was quiet, controlled, like watching silk catch fire and pretending not to notice the smoke. She always believed that control lived in volume, in slamming doors, in shaming glances, in rewriting memories loud enough to drown out dissent. But I had learned something she never did. Real control is in restraint, in silence, in letting someone destroy themselves without ever lifting your voice. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to storm into her house, throw documents in her face, demand apologies. That would be too easy for her. Something she could twist into more drama. No. I was going to let the facts speak for themselves. I started planning the second wedding, not because I needed the ceremony, but because I needed the closure. This time, it wouldn't be about flowers or dresses or perfection. It would be about truth. I wanted only the people who knew who I was and still showed up anyway. No games, no illusions, just presence. And while the details came together, simple, elegant, real, I set another plan into motion. Packages, letters, flash drives. All of it prepared like chess pieces moved in silence. A story unfolding in the background, just waiting for the right day. She thought she'd humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, but what she didn't realize was that the moment she slapped me, she handed me the narrative. And now I was the one writing the ending. Not for her, for me, for my father, for every person who ever felt cornered by her guilt. She built her life on a stage she controlled. But the curtains were already starting to fall, and soon she'd be standing in front of an audience she never expected, finally exposed for who she really was. I didn't want spectacle. I didn't want revenge served cold or loud. I wanted truth. Served quietly, wrapped in ribbons and mailed with no return address. So I did what she never expected. I planned another wedding. Not a redo, a reclamation. Small, intimate. The kind where every guest was chosen because they knew me, not because they fit some family image. No photographers, no grand entrances, just love. And while the dress hung by the window, soft light touching its hem, I sealed the first envelope with trembling fingers. That's when it truly began. Each package was careful, curated like art. A flash drive labeled only with initials, a photocopy of a bank statement with dates circled in red, typed letters, anonymous but unmistakable in voice. They went out in silence, to cousins, to aunts, to old family friends who used to call her elegant, graceful, the glue. She'd always been good at curating her legend, but legends crack when light finds them, and I was done keeping secrets for her, the kind of done that doesn't look back, the kind that smiles at the storm coming and says, "Let them watch." I never said a word to her, not a single warning. That would have given her time to spin the narrative, to cry her performative tears, to gather allies before the truth landed in their hands. No. I let her find out the way she made others feel for years. Blindsided, vulnerable, unsure who to trust. The morning before the ceremony, the phone calls started. Not to me, to everyone else. My aunt called and said, "Lara, I didn't know, I'm sorry." And I just nodded. Not because I needed the apology, but because someone finally believed me. Then came the silence. No calls, no texts, just tension. And that's how I knew it worked. When narcissists lose control of the story, they don't argue. They vanish, waiting for a new script to appear. But this time there wasn't one. Just those quiet moments where the truth breathes freely, like dust rising from an old carpet finally shaken out in the sun. And that morning, the day of my real wedding, I sipped coffee by the window and smiled. Not because I'd hurt her, but because I'd stopped letting her hurt me. It started slowly, the unraveling. A cousin removed her from a group chat. An old friend of hers posted a quote about false saints and silent sinners with no tags, but everyone knew. And then came the confrontation she never saw coming. My father standing at her door, folder in hand, voice steady. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he just laid it all out. "I stayed silent for too long," he told her. But Lara didn't. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. He told me later her face didn't break. It cracked. Slow, stunned, ashamed. The next day, he filed for divorce. That shook her more than anything I'd sent, because for all her manipulation, she believed he'd always stay. That he was too tired to fight back, too numb to leave. But there's something poetic about quiet men finding their voice after decades of silence. He told me it was the recordings that did it. Her voice, not the one she used at dinners, but the one behind closed doors. The one that threatened, mocked, belittled. "I didn't want to believe you," he said, "but now I can't unhear it." There was a sadness in his voice, but no regret. Meanwhile, I was fitting my dress for the second time. No veil, no dramatic train. Just a soft ivory fabric that moved when I walked, like I wasn't hiding anything anymore. The florist arrived early, setting up wildflowers in loose bundles. Nothing manicured, just real. My fiancé, ever steady, kissed my forehead as I checked the place cards. And there it was, tucked in the very last row, her name. Not in the front, not near family, but far back, alone. No title, no spotlight, just a seat, because she would be there, but not as the mother of the bride. I debated it, whether to invite her at all, but then I realized removing her would be mercy. Letting her sit among the very people she once controlled, now watching her from a distance, that was justice. There would be no speech, no confrontation, just presence. Silent. I wanted her to feel what I had felt for years, excluded, overlooked, irrelevant. And somehow, that seat in the back row said it all without saying a word. A front row seat to everything she swore I'd never have. She arrived 10 minutes late. Not enough to make a scene, but just late enough that every head turned when the door creaked open. She wore beige, faded makeup, no smile. I saw her before she saw me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't brace for her presence. I watched her scan the room, searching for the seat she assumed would be waiting near the front. Her eyes landed on the last row, on the folded card with her name. Her mouth tightened, but she walked. No protests, just quiet steps to her new place in my story. No one greeted her. No one offered a hand or a hug. The air around her was different now. Thinner, colder, like the myth had finally melted. She looked smaller in that seat, diminished, and yet somehow still trying to sit with dignity, like she hadn't been publicly unmasked. But I knew better. We both did. This wasn't punishment. This was truth, given form. And I didn't need to say a thing. Her stillness said enough. Her isolation, more honest than any apology she never gave me. The ceremony began. Simple, intimate, no distractions. I could feel eyes on me, not because of drama, but because of peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you stop performing and start breathing again. I looked around at the people who stayed, the ones who didn't need me to be perfect, just honest. And when I glanced one last time at the back row, she was watching. Not with rage, not even sadness, just silence. I don't know if she expected to feel proud or betrayed. But what she felt didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she was finally seeing me. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged. No interruptions this time, no theatrics. Just a new story being written in real time. One where I didn't need her approval. One where the past didn't dictate the present. And as I kissed the man who chose me, not despite my scars, but because of them, I realized something. The takedown was never about revenge. It was about release. And while she sat there, wrapped in whispers and stares, I stood in front of everything she said I'd never deserve. And I didn't just claim it. I invited her to watch. When I stepped up to speak, I didn't feel nerves. I didn't feel that twisting in my stomach that used to come before every confrontation with her. I felt calm, anchored. The microphone was warm in my hand, and the faces before me were soft, open. There was no fear in the room, no tight shoulders or fake smiles, just stillness and love. I took a breath, let the words settle inside me before I gave them away. This wasn't going to be a speech about pain. Not today. Today was about something she never taught me. Freedom. "I want to thank you," I began, scanning the faces that had shown up and stood firm. Not just for being here, but for staying when things got hard, for listening without judgment, for holding space when I had none left to hold for myself. My voice didn't tremble. If anything, it rang clearer than ever. You've seen parts of me I once thought I had to hide. The parts that weren't polished, weren't easy. But you never asked me to be easy. You just asked me to be real. And that gave me the courage to stand here now. I paused then, just for a moment, and let my eyes drift to the back row. She didn't look away. But she didn't look proud either. Just still. Maybe stunned. Maybe waiting for the blow. But I wasn't here to throw punches. I wasn't here to relive the wreckage. To those who tried to silence me with shame, I continued, I want you to know. I kept the receipts. I kept them not out of spite, but out of survival. And now, I smiled softly. Now I keep the peace. Because peace isn't something you find. It's something you build, brick by truth-soaked brick. Those words settled over the room like a blanket, soft, but weighted with everything I didn't say directly. And in that moment, I didn't need her approval. I didn't need closure in the way we're taught to crave it. I had already written my ending. This was just the reading of it, public, purposeful, and mine. And as I turned back toward the man standing beside me, hand in mine, I realized something simple but earth-shaking. I was no longer trying to prove anything. I was finally living it. The applause was gentle, not thunderous, not forced, just honest. A few people wiped tears. A few smiled, wide and proud, like they knew exactly what that moment meant. Not just for me, but for all the parts of me that survived to get here. I stepped back beside him, my partner, and felt his thumb brush mine. It was the smallest gesture, but it grounded me more than 1,000 cheers ever could. That was the thing about healing. It doesn't explode into existence. It arrives in fragments, in glances, in the quiet that doesn't need to be filled. I glanced toward the back again. She hadn't moved. Her hands rested stiffly in her lap, jaw locked tight like she was holding her breath, or maybe holding back words that had no power anymore. She wasn't the villain in my story. Not anymore. She was just a person who had built a world out of control and now found herself on the outside of one she couldn't shape. And I felt something strange in that moment. Not pity, not rage, just distance. The emotional kind that isn't cruel, just necessary. The kind that says, you don't get to live here anymore. After the ceremony, we didn't do the dramatic walk down the aisle. We didn't toss rice or pose for photos. We walked hand in hand through the garden, past the people we loved, past the seat where she still sat frozen. The sun had shifted slightly, casting golden light over everything, like the world was giving us a soft exhale. I heard laughter. Real, warm laughter, the kind that used to feel foreign to me, like it belonged to other people's families. But now it was mine, because joy didn't feel borrowed anymore. It felt earned. Someone handed me a glass of champagne, and I raised it without needing a toast. That moment was the toast. To new stories, to chosen peace, to freedom that doesn't ask for permission. And when I looked around at the faces I loved, the ones who stayed, the ones who never asked me to perform, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not defiance, not victory, just stillness, the good kind, the kind you settle into when you're no longer surviving. You're simply living. We didn't have a getaway car waiting. No streamers, no honking horns. Just a car with the windows down and music playing low. The kind of drive that doesn't rush, because there's nothing left to run from. He reached over, laced his fingers with mine, and I leaned back into the seat with a breath that felt like it came from the center of my chest. Not the kind of breath you take to calm down. The kind you take when you finally arrived. And outside the window, the world moved on like it always does. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. Behind us, the damage she tried to bury was no longer mine to carry. The lies she used to build her life? They belonged to her now, completely. Not because I exposed them, but because I refused to carry them forward. She would go home to whispers, to eyes that finally looked through her instead of up to her. And me? I would go forward, not untouched, but undefeated. With every scar still visible, but none of them defining me. They were chapters, not the whole book. As we turned down the hill and the sun dipped just enough to cast that golden haze over the road, I found myself smiling. Not because of revenge. Not even because of justice, but because I had rewritten the ending. She tried to silence me with shame, tried to humiliate me into submission, but she forgot the most dangerous thing you can give a woman who's been silent too long: a voice and a reason to use it. And now, she didn't just get a front row seat to the life she tried to prevent. She had no choice but to watch it shine. So I rolled the window down just a little more, let the wind tangle in my hair, and laughed. A full, deep laugh, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. And somewhere behind us, in the echo of her control, a door closed for the last time. She tried to rewrite my story, but in the end, I gave her exactly what she feared most: a perfect view of a life she could never destroy. And I didn't just walk away. I drove off, glowing, in love, and free.